Hello again. I'm sure we're all of us familiar with Florence Nightingale, who revolutionised nursing in Britain during the Crimean War. The Crimean War was, incidentally, fought between Britain, France and Turkey on one side and against Russia in what is now Ukraine in the 1850s. She was at one time an almost mythical figure for this country. She was in children's books. Her image even appeared on British currency. The £10 note was known for years colloquially as a nightingale. Back in the 1980s, left-wing educationalists and other socialists decided that Florence Nightingale was altogether too much associated with the British Empire. They didn't like her for that reason, and also because a lot of immigration was taking place in the country at that time, they decided that it would be a good idea to have some new figures for British history, figures who reflected the multicultural makeup of society rather than just the homogenous white society which existed in Victorian Britain. They hit upon a very little known figure who had also spent time in the Crimea during the war there. She wasn't a nurse, but that wasn't really a problem. She was going to be billed as a rival to, and ultimately to supplant, Florence Nightingale. This was always the intention. She may not have been a nurse, but she had the advantage of being a black Jamaican, and that was really her selling point as far as these people were concerned. The past would just have to be rewritten. No, she would have to be turned into a nurse, simply so that she could appear to be something like Florence Nightingale, only better, and of course more multicultural. Here is Mary Seacole, the woman chosen to supplant Florence Nightingale. British history was about to be erased. Florence Nightingale's main problem for the modern world is that she was very middle class and white and very deeply religious as well, and that's not very popular these days either. Her nursing and most of her activities were motivated by her love of God. Mary Seacole was a black Jamaican woman whose mother owned a hotel in Kingston, Jamaica. Her mother also used to dispense folk remedies, herbal remedies for various common ailments. Mary Seacole lived quite an exciting life. She travelled about a lot. She went to Panama and prospected for gold. And in Panama, she opened an hotel very similar to the one that her mother ran in Kingston. She and her brother set up a business to promote a gold mine. And for that reason, in September 1854, Seacole came to London, and the idea was she was trying to get this gold mine listed on the London Stock Exchange. It had nothing at all. She hadn't come here because she wanted to be a nurse or anything of that sort, which is something that you'll sometimes read about in books about her. Things didn't work out in London, and Seacole was running short of money. So she applied to the army, asking if she could get a job going to the Crimea as an assistant there. There's a myth which is built up that she applied to be a nurse in the Crimea and was rejected because of the colour of her skin. That's all nonsense. She never actually applied to be a nurse, and even if she had done, she probably wouldn't have got anywhere. For one thing, she had no experience of hospitals. For another, she was 50, which was a lot older than most of the nurses they were looking for, really. In the end, she found a financial backer who would help her set up a restaurant in the Crimea. A restaurant, by the way, which was going to be exclusively for officers. The idea was that it would serve luxury goods, things like champagne, that were a little bit in short supply at that time in the Crimea for obvious reasons. So she set off and managed to set up a restaurant there. She decided to call it the British Hotel, but it wasn't really a hotel. Nobody was able to spend a night there. It was really just a restaurant for wealthy people that could afford to pay for what she was offering. On a few occasions, when there were big battles, Mary Seacole used to take some goods from her restaurant, food and drink, load them up onto mules, and take them off and sell the refreshments to spectators to the battle. She carried a shoulder bag with a few bandages in as well, and she would distribute those if they were needed to wounded soldiers. This only happened 3 times, so this wasn't a big thing for her. There seems little there to create a legend from. I mean, how can you pretend the woman was a nurse? The thing is, a lot of nurses working in Britain in the 1980s were, and they still are, black. So it was felt that maybe having a black role model for young people would be a handy thing. The way it was done was by denigrating a well-known white nurse and then having the opportunity to replace her with a black one. This was really, really successful. A few years ago, St Thomas's Hospital in central London decided to put a statue of a nurse outside. Obviously, the obvious choice was Florence Nightingale. Florence Nightingale had a long association with St Thomas's. A museum devoted to her is at St Thomas's. Mary Seacole never even went to the place. Nevertheless, the statue, when it was erected, was of Mary Seacole. You can see it here. As you can see, instead of a famous nurse, they decided to put a statue of a black restaurant proprietor outside their hospital, which was rather an odd thing to do. Children's books perpetuate this false story about Mary Seacole. They do it by having illustrations showing her wearing a nurse's uniform and tending men in hospital, which is something she never did. These pictures really are fake history. Today, this process is pretty well complete. Florence Nightingale has been completely overshadowed by Mary Seacole. The original aim might have been a decent enough one to give young black people, a role model with whom they could identify, but it's taken on a life of its own, and it's now part of a general attempt to rewrite British history. Out go white people and in come any random black or Asian people that can be shoehorned in. It's part of the multicultural project, and that's something that really deserves 1 or 2 videos of its own.